Hello and welcome to the second session of the chapter This is Jody's Fawn, written by Marjorie Kinnan Rawlings. Before we jump into the next part of this chapter, let me give you a brief recap on what we read about part 1 and 2 of the story in my last session. Jody's father was bitten by a rattlesnake, and to remove the poison of the rattlesnake from his body, they killed a doe and used its heart and liver. Penny Baxter, that is Jody's father, was saved, but Jody all the time was worried about the fawn which was left behind in the forest. He wanted to adopt that fawn as his pet. He asked his father's and mother's permission, and on being permitted, he went with Millwheel to the forest to find the fawn. He searched for that fawn for a long time. At first, he was worried whether the fawn had wandered somewhere else, or he also thought if the fawn had been eaten by some animal. But no, he didn't lose his hopes and he kept on searching for the fawn. Now in today's part, we are going to see whether he meets the fawn or not. Let's start with the reading and explanation of part 3. And just as I did in the last session, I explained the part that I read there and then. So be attentive when you are listening to it. Here we go. Movement directly in front of him startled him so that he tumbled backward. Startled means surprised and tumbled means fell. The fawn lifted its face to his. It turned its head with a wide, wondering motion and shook him through with the stare of its liquid eyes. It was quivering. Quivering means shaking slightly. It made no effort to rise or run. Jody could not trust himself to move. He whispered, "It's me." The fawn lifted its nose, scenting him. Scenting means smelling. He reached out one hand and laid it on the soft neck. The touch made him delirious. Delirious means extremely excited. He moved forward on all fours until he was close beside it. He put his arms around its body. A light convulsion passed over it, but it did not stir. Convulsion means shiver, and stir means move. Now this paragraph explains how Jody and Fawn first saw each other. When Jody was looking for the fawn and he was on all fours on the ground, that is on his knees and palms, and he was searching for the footprints of the fawn, suddenly there was a movement which surprised Jody and he fell backwards. It was the fawn. The fawn appeared in front of him and the fawn turned its head with a wide motion. It looked at Jody with its liquidy eyes. It was shaking, but Jody purposely did not make an effort to move from there, because if he had moved, then he would have scared the fawn. Jody whispered to the fawn, "It's me." The fawn lifted its nose and started smelling Jody, and then Jody put out his one hand and laid it on the soft neck of the fawn. Jody was extremely excited, and then slowly he moved near the fawn and put his arms around its body. The moment Jody put his arms around the fawn's body, the fawn shivered a little, but it did not move. He stroked its sides as gently as though the fawn were a china deer. A china deer is a clay deer that is easily broken, and he might break it. Its skin was very soft. It was sleek and clean. Sleek means smooth and shiny, and had a sweet scent of grass. He rose slowly and lifted the fawn from the ground. Its legs hung limply. Limply means without support. They were surprisingly long, and he had to hoist the fawn Hoist means pull up higher, as high as possible under his arm. When Jody came near the fawn, he started to touch him gently, as if the fawn was very delicate. It had smooth and shiny skin, and it was smelling of sweet grass. Then Jody rose slowly and lifted the fawn in his arms. The legs of the fawn were hanging without support, but they were very long, so Jody had to lift up the fawn a little bit higher so that he could move with him in his arms. He was afraid that it might kick and bleat at the sight and smell of its mother. He skirted means avoided, the clearing, and pushed his way into the thicket. Thicket means dense bushes. It was difficult to fight through with his burden. The fawn's leg caught in the bushes and he could not lift his own with freedom. He tried to shield. Shield means protect its face from prickling vines. Prickling vines are sensitive climbers or climbing plants. Its head bobbed with his stride. Bobbed means bounced and stride means walk. His heart thumped with the marvel of its acceptance of him. He reached the trail and walked as fast as he could until he came to the intersection with the road home. Intersection means joint. He stopped to rest and set the fawn down on its dangling legs. It wavered on them. Wavered means shivered. It looked at him and bleated. Bleated means made a sound. Now Jody decided to pick up that fawn and take him home. But it was afraid that if it sees its dead mother, then it might start kicking and shouting. So, in order to avoid that space where the doe's dead body was kept, he stepped into the dense bushes. And as he was moving through the bushes, it was difficult for him because he had a fawn in his arms and the legs of the fawns were getting tangled with all the plants in his way. Jody tried to protect Fawn's face from the thorns of these bushes. And as Jody walked, the head of the fawn was also moving from side to side. Jody was very excited because now the fawn had accepted him. And then he was out of the forest and he reached the trail. He walked as fast as he could and he came to the joint where one of the roads was leading to his home. Then Jody was very tired, so he kept the fawn on the ground. But since the fawn was very weak, it was shivering on its legs. The fawn looked at Jody and started to bleat, means make a sound. He said, enchanted. Enchanted means in happiness or happily. I will carry you after I get my breath. He remembered his father saying that a fawn would follow if it had first been carried. He started away slowly. The fawn stared after him. He came back to it and stroked it and walked away again. It took a few wobbling steps. Wobbling means shaky, towards him and cried piteously. Piteously means with pity. It was willing to follow him. It belonged to him. It was his own. He was light-headed with his joy. Light-headed means unable to think clearly. He wanted to fondle it. Fondle means hug. To run and romp with it. Romp means play. To call to it to come to him. He dared not alarm it. Alarm means frighten. He picked it up and carried it in front of him over his two arms. It seemed to him that he walked without effort. Now Jody was tired of carrying him, so he wanted to rest. But then suddenly he remembered his father saying that if a fawn is carried initially, then it would definitely follow the person. So Jody came back and he patted it or stroked it and walked away again. The fawn took a few shaky steps and it cried with pity. It was willing to follow him because the fawn belonged to him. Jody felt that the fawn was his own and he was so joyful. Jody wanted to hug it. He wanted to run and play with it. And he also wanted to call it to his home. But at the same time, Jody did not want to frighten the fawn. And now it seemed that he was no longer tired and he could carry the fawn effortlessly because there was so much of joy inside him that all the tiredness was now gone. His arms began to ache. Ache means pain, and he was forced to stop again. When he walked on, the fawn followed him at once. He allowed it to walk a little distance, then picked it up again. The distance home was nothing. He could have walked all day and into the night, carrying it and watching it follow. He was wet with sweat, but a light breeze blew through the June morning, cooling him. The sky was as clear as spring water in a blue china cup. Now, this line, the sky was as clear as spring water, is a simile where the sky is compared to spring water in a blue colored china cup. He came to the clearing. It was fresh and green after the night's rain. He fumbled with the latch and was finally obliged to set down the fawn to manage it. Then he had an idea. He would walk into the house, into Penny's bedroom, with the fawn walking behind him. But at the steps, the fawn balked. Balked means was unwilling to do something and refused to climb them. He picked it up and went to his father. Penny lay with closed eyes. Jody called, "Pa, look." After walking a little distance, Jody's arm started to pain and then he was forced to stop again. But when he walked on, the fawn followed him. And he enjoyed this little incident of him carrying it in his arms and the fawn again following it. He could have done it day and night. He was so tired that he was full with sweat, but there was a cool breeze which instantly made him comfortable. Jody was now near his house. He was right at the steps of his house. As he was managing to open the latch, he had an idea that he would go in his father's bedroom with Fawn walking behind him. So he kept the fawn down and he expected the fawn to climb up the stairs. But the fawn couldn't climb it and it refused. Finally, Jody had to pick up the fawn and go inside his father's bedroom. Penny lay with his eyes closed on the bed and then Jody called out to him. Penny turned his head. Jody stood beside him. The fawn clutched hard against him. Clutched means held. It seemed to Penny that the boy's eyes were as bright as the fawn's. He said, "I'm glad you found him." Jody then went to the kitchen. The fawn wobbled after him. A pan of morning's milk stood in the kitchen, safe. The cream had risen on it. He skimmed the cream. Skimmed means removed. Into a jug. He poured milk into a small gourd. He held it out to the fawn. It butted it suddenly. Butted means pushed. Smelling the milk. He saved it precariously. Precariously means dangerously, from spilling over the floor. It could make nothing of the milk in the gourd. When Jody called Penny, he turned his head towards the boy. Jody stood there and the fawn had held hard against Jody's body. Penny looked at Jody's eyes. They were as bright as the fawn's eyes because there was joy in it. And he told him that he was happy that he found the fawn. After that, Jody went into the kitchen to feed the fawn, and the fawn also slowly walked after him. There was a pan of milk in kitchen and cream was on top of that milk. So Jody carefully removed that cream into a jug and put some milk in a gourd. He placed the gourd in front of the fawn for it to drink milk, but the fawn pushed it aside and then he started to smell the milk. But the moment the fawn pushed that gourd, Jody very cautiously stopped it from spilling it on the floor. This line, "It could make nothing of the milk in the gourd," means that the fawn could not drink the milk on its own. He dipped his fingers in the milk and thrust them into the fawn's soft, wet mouth. It sucked greedily. When he withdrew him, it bleated frantically and butted him. Frantically means crazily. He dipped his fingers again, and as the fawn sucked, he lowered them slowly into the milk. The fawn blew and sucked and snorted. Snorted means it made a sound of breath through its nose. It stamped its small hooves impatiently. As long as he held his fingers below the level of the milk, the fawn was content. It closed its eyes dreamily. It was ecstasy to feel its tongue against his hand. Ecstasy means happiness. Its small tail flicked back and forth. The last of the milk vanished in a swirl of foam and gurgling. When Jody saw that the fawn couldn't drink milk on its own, then he had an idea. He dipped his fingers in the milk and pushed those fingers in the fawn's mouth so as to give him a taste of milk. The fawn started to suck his fingers greedily. Whenever Jody would remove his fingers, the fawn would start bleating crazily and pushing him. So Jody would again dip his fingers in the milk and the fawn would suck. Till the time he kept his fingers dipped, the fawn sucked the milk happily and snorted crazily. Because of the happiness, it started to stamp its small hooves impatiently and it flicked its tail back and forth. Jody was also very happy. Just the touch of that fawn's tongue against his fingers made him excited. And then at the end, the last drop of the milk was also vanished. The sound of gurgling and foam in the milk itself told how excited the fawn was to drink it. Comprehension Check 3 on page number 94. How did Jody bring the fawn back home? Jody picked up the fawn into his arms and proceeded to home. After some distance, he kept the fawn down and took rest. Later on, the fawn followed him. Thus, he brought the fawn back home. Question number 2. Jody was filled with emotion after he found the fawn. Can you find at least 3 words or phrases which show how he feels? First, the fawn shook him through with the stare of its liquid eye. Second, the touch of the fawn made him delirious. And third, as though the fawn were a china deer. Question number 3. How did the deer drink milk from the gourd? Jody dipped his fingers in the milk. Then he left the fawn suck his fingers. He did so several times. Finally, the fawn drank off all the milk from the gourd. Last question. Why didn't the fawn follow Jody up the steps as he had thought it would? The answer is the fawn didn't know how to raise its feet to climb the steps. Well, that's it. Here we finish today's story. And in the part that we read today, we understood how sensitive this little boy Jody was towards animals. He took so much care of the fawn that the fawn readily accepted him. The way he carried the fawn in his arms, the way he touched the fawn, the thoughts or the feelings which Jody had in his heart, the excitement that he had to raise this fawn, the way he taught the fawn to drink milk, everything is so touching and lovely. It's a beautiful feeling of giving love to the animals. So what moral does this story give us? If we be kind to living beings, if we keep our superstitions a bit aside and live our life rationally, then wouldn't there be a big change in this world? So the moral of the story is not to harm the animals. And in case unknowingly, if you have done it, you can correct it by being sensitive to them. If not them, to other animals at least. This chapter talks about this particular sensitive feeling towards the animals, and that is what we have to learn. Be sensitive to all the living beings. You never know who can be of what help. That's all in this session, and here we finish the reading and explanation of this entire chapter. In my next session, we'll discuss the question answers and the textbook exercises of this chapter. Till then, take good care of yourself, be safe, be happy, be kind. Thank you very much.